Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more.
Now, you're welcome back. So many texts coming in. For instance, the most recent one says, penalties my arse. So beat that, 53106. And you'll get us at Off the Ball on Twitter as well. So Saturday at Croke Park, I think, was a touch pedestrian, with due respect to Derry's lightning start. And then Sunday at Croke Park was a complete frenzy. We have Enda McGinley, 3-time All-Ireland winner with Tyrone, with us. Manager of Antrim for 2 years as well. Stepped down this summer. Enda, great to have you on.
Good to be back, Joe.
And Billy Joe Padden, who's played for Mayo and Armagh. Hello, Billy.
Hello, Joe.
News this evening, if you're just tuning in, James Horn has stepped down as Mayo manager. We'll come to that in due course. But let's start with Galway against Armagh. Galway 2-21, Armagh 3-18. Galway win 4-1 on penalties. Still feels somewhat strange to say that sentence. Rian O'Neill with his 78-minute equaliser. We had the row, we had the sendings off, we had extra time. We had Killian McDade with his goal and his almost equally outstanding equaliser in some respects, and then we had the penalties, and then we have the fallout, I suppose, is where we are 24 hours on. Let's hear from two of the main protagonists before we get into this. Kieran McGeaney, first of all, speaking to the media at large. Here's Kieran McGeaney.
In terms of the ending of normal time and the way that unfolded, which was pretty ugly, and the referee having to take action, how unsettling was it, and what was your take on it? Because it looked from up in the stands like it all got a bit nasty and thuggish.
It's not something you want to see, and I suppose this year, that's two of them like we sort of been in, and it's unfortunate, and it's. But I always think, those things shouldn't happen. Definitely shouldn't. But I think there's a few simple things we could do to stop it. They shouldn't be running together at half time. I know how it started, but that's the thing. Once it starts, then it can get out of control. It's not a nice part, and I wouldn't want to see it. But again, then trial by social media is a very poor way to go. I showed the last time, but people had sat there and actually watched the video. They might have got it right.
But don't players have to assume responsibility as well as adults? Is there not an onus on a player to recognise?
Well, what happens if somebody pushes you? Do you push back?
Well,
no, but I'm just. What would you do?
In this instance.
No, what would you do?
In this instance.
What would you do?
In this instance.
What would you? I'm asking. It's a very simple question. If somebody pushed you, would you push them back?
And
I know it's a yes or no.
Well, it's not.
It is. If somebody pushes you, you can't look for headlines if you're not going to ask. If you're not going to answer my questions, why should I answer yours?
Because I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to ask them.
But am I not allowed to ask one?
But I'm here to ask questions. I'm not here to answer them. I don't think people want to hear my opinion on it.
But I'm asking you as a person, just a very simple question.
Well, it would depend on the circumstances, and it would depend, I suppose, on the lead that I was given from maybe a manager or an equivalent in that situation. But you're saying if they're going in at half time.
I'm just asking you as a person.
If someone pushed me?
Yeah.
Well, it just depends on the circumstances. It's not as cut and dried or black and white as that. But I'm asking you, right, in the context of what you saw there, and you're saying simple things could have been done. Do you as a manager say to your team, step back? Do you as a manager say to your team, don't engage there? Or do you use that to the authorities?
Of course you do. Did you not see me doing it?
No, I didn't.
There you go. Maybe you should be one of the ones who watch the video.
No, and I will, but
fair play to you.
To be fair, you've said your take on that is it shouldn't happen. It hasn't happened. So would you now call on the GAA to address the point you're making of saying we can do something simple?
If everybody's treated in the same way.
Do you feel you've been mistreated?
No, every question is going to be answered with another one. I said if everybody's treated fairly, if everybody who pulls or pushes and starts something like that there, then yeah.
So that's McGeaney. We'll come to Porg Joyce in a moment. Just hearing that end and react to it, I wondered there if he's seen the gouge, because he's quite defensive of his team and he's talking about pulling and dragging and pushing and these things happen. I suspect, listening to him, I'm not sure if he has seen the eye gouge at that point post-match, because I don't think he would condone that in any way, I suspect.
I would imagine, given how those things happen and the shouting that'll be going down the tunnel and the communicating that'll be going down the tunnel, I would doubt if anybody wasn't aware that there was an allegation at the very least of an eye gouge, and that Galway were particularly upset about that. I would imagine that somewhere around the Armagh camp that would have been sussed out at a fairly early stage. It's sort of a wry smile when he said we've been, that's the second one we've been involved in. It was actually the third, obviously, that they were involved in. But I think it's very difficult for McGinley. In that situation, it was a bit of the classic schmuzzle going down the tunnel. But you're talking about a manager that has given everything for that team for 7 years, had them on the cusp of an All-Ireland semi-final, and to lose on penalties. So I think it's going to be very difficult to get him to make a specific statement on a particular incident that is away from everywhere where his mind was for the previous 90 odd minutes, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't be putting too much store in terms of whether he addressed the eye gouging or not. It certainly wasn't put to him at that stage. He was just asked to comment on the row, and look, he just done the classic line of a manager. He's hardly going to throw players under the bus whenever they put in that performance for them.
No, true. Here's Pádraig Joyce then speaking afterwards.
Thrilling game, to be honest. It was a good footballing game. KG to start, 7 points each at half time, and then second half I think we opened up a good bit and got ahead near the end of the game, played some great football, but then lost our way. Something we'd addressed because we'd done the same against Mayo and Armagh. We addressed it and we still lost our way. So we had the game probably won about 3 or 4 times and came back, and then obviously the scenes after condemned the scenes at full time. They're ugly, they shouldn't be happening, but they happened at the same time. And then we lost our captain in extra time. I don't understand how they pick out one player, but we'll look at the video and see what happened there. But again, we had to take control of the game in extra time, which we did, and we showed good character, and even then get a sucker punch of a goal again then in the second half of extra time. You know, it looked like we were dead and buried, but the lads showed brilliant heart, brilliant character, and kept playing football, kept playing through the lines, and Killian popped up with an amazing equaliser at the end. And in fairness, like my heart does go to Kieran McGinley and the Armagh team and supporters, because it's no way to lose a match or to play a match at quarter final. Like we're condensing this season into 6 or 7 months, which is crazy, to be honest. And like both sets of players, Galway and Armagh, have trained flat out since last December, and let's call a spade a spade. Like, that's no way to lose a match. And while we take the victory, my heart goes out to them, because they had a great colour today and great support, and it's not the way to do it, and something the GAA needs to look at, because we're not a soccer like this. Penalties is for soccer, it's not for GAA in my eyes. And a good fair play to the Armagh players and the Galway players that took the penalties and the 2 keepers. But
have you practiced the penalties? You say it was a lottery, but you looked like a team who were prepared for it.
We've been practicing penalties since last December, since we started training, because I knew the way the games were going, something was going to happen. And in fairness, Shane, Rob, Damien, Matty Tierney and Kieran Molloy would have been our 5th taker. They practice them nearly every night. They take a few in Gleeson most nights. So,
Alright, how did you regroup at the end of normal time? Because you probably knew that there's the possibility of red cards, given the blows you've taken. That was a very difficult time for you.
Yeah, no, it did, because we came in like, and I'm not saying like the ugly scenes, it shouldn't be happening, don't get me wrong, but like when you can't just stand back and let lads in top out. So we tried to sort it out. In fairness to the Armagh management and our own management, like I think we got it pulled away as quick as we could and got lads down the tunnel and get in and focus on the match. Then you pick a team to go out, and then you're told on the pitch just before extra time that you're down your captain. So to go and regroup again then and get Billy Mannion in for us, in fairness to him, set up a brilliant goal, like, great footballer. It's his first championship debut for Galway. What a place, what a time to make it for him, and had great composure to hand the ball across to Killian for the goal. But look at it, we knew that the game wasn't lost at the same time. There was still 20 minutes to be played, and while it felt like a loss at full time, I think the lads regrouped well, and I just came back and says, go back playing football, just work the ball through the lines, which we did. We controlled the game, I think, in the first half of extra time very, very well, and then obviously the sucker punch in the second half was a tough one to take. But in fairness to the lads, look, I couldn't speak high enough of them. They're exhausted in there, but it's great to win. We go home, we'll regroup and recover and see where we're at. We'll look at the video on Tuesday night and see what the crack is.
Do you spend the next couple of days worrying about what you might have to appeal, who could be suspended? Because you might know for a couple of days, then you might have to appeal it.
No, we can't focus on something we don't know what's going to happen. So all I know is that we're playing Derry start of the week, so we'll get everybody ready for that.
But you could plan right now if you knew who was available, but you might know.
As of now, everyone's available, bar Sean Kelly, but we look at that as well.
Pádraig, you mentioned about, on the video that we saw, the only thing we saw of Sean Kelly was he was reacted quite furiously to what was seen a very clear eye gouge on Damien Comer.
So you're telling me there was an eye gouge then?
Well, that's what it appeared to be on Damien Comer by a non-playing panel member.
Okay, we're sure that'll be dealt with. I didn't see it, Frank, honest to God. I don't know, I was the far side of the pitch, I came over, I seen scuff was going on, I tried to pull our lads away, and that was it, all I done.
Pádraig Joyce there, speaking to the media afterwards. We're here with Billy Joe Padden and Enda McGinley. I mean, I wondered if McGeaney had seen the eye gouge. Certainly there, Billy Joe, Pádraig Joyce, he may have heard about it. You suspect he did hear about it from aggrieved players, but he doesn't seem to have seen it at that stage either. So who knows what the managers, in fairness, have seen or haven't seen at full time when they're doing these interviews. It's difficult. I mean, that's why McGeaney's instinct was potentially to jump in and defend his players there.
Yes, and I doubt very much that they'd have seen it. I agree with Enda. There would have been so much talk about it in the walking into the dressing room that you would have heard that there may be something positive like that, or possibly happened like that. But they would not have seen it. So when you don't see these things and you're not absolutely sure, you don't want to comment on them, particularly when you're dealing with opposition and other players like that. But I suppose from his point of view, I think he was very fair-minded in it, and he was looking ahead to the next game. I think both managers said there's something they didn't want to see. I think we're all in agreement with that the GAA needs to step up and do something about it, because it's a disgrace really what's happening at the minute. And managers may point to going back through the video and you look at it forensically, and there might only be 2 or 3 players that do something that can be punished. But at the same time, when you have 35 people, backroom staff, all getting involved in an incident like that, it has to be eradicated from the game. And I see the roots of it in a lot of the stuff that happens on the game when the ball is in play. Too much contact, man-on-man contact when the ball is not there, man-on-man contact when the ball is not even in play. And to me, I see that as the seed that grows into that frustration. And if you think of in the last couple of minutes of normal time, and just as an example, Shane Walsh pinned James Morgan to the ground, unnecessarily for that. And that's, I'm not picking out Shane and anything. That's a tactical decision. It's not him losing his head. And you would see that from various counties over the years. And that's what has to be taken out of the game. And I think you reduce that amount of contact. I think you reduce the likelihood of having those sort of altercations and melees at the end of games where players are totally frustrated. And actually, just to extend that point a moment, if you're ultra cynical, you would suggest that Shane Walsh wasn't unaware that Morgan was on a yellow and figured, well, a yellow apiece here isn't a bad deal for me. Like, referees potentially need to get involved there, recognise what's happening, and maybe just give Shane Walsh a yellow, because it did look like he was the main offender in that particular instant.
If that's to me, I've seen Morgan play, and I know the type of player he is, and I would know Shane Walsh brave and well too. Shane Walsh would have taken quite a bit of punishment over that game, and he was down out round midfield as well. So the issue, like the black card's supposed to be there in terms of contact off the ball. You're not supposed to be doing that, but it happens, and very little seems to come of it. I didn't see what started the one with wrestling on the ground, but it would always be a wee bit suspicious whenever somebody like Morgan, with the reputation that he carries, and somebody like Walsh is wrestling on the ground. I would always be querying who the guilty party is there. But I would agree with Billy Joe in terms of that there's plenty of contact going on, but this talk about something, they have to eradicate this from the game and they need to make an example. For me, all of that is rubbish. There's no point, be it the eye gouging or be it the melee, suddenly high horse time, let's make an example. The amount of times I've seen somebody saying or tweeting these boys need to make an example of it. The GAA has to learn and stop trying to make an example. They made an example of Tyrone at the start of the year for getting involved in melee, 4 boys sent off. All of a sudden a headlock was the worst possible thing you could do in the game. Ethan Rafferty pulled Comer down in a headlock yesterday, wasn't even dealt with at all. The sending off for Armagh, on one side you could call it as legitimate, but again there was 2 similar shoulders to heads in the Kerry game and they weren't dealt with at all. So there is so much inconsistency in the rules. Then they go and try and make an example out of somebody. The lawyers will absolutely drive a bus through the holes in the arguments and the lack of consistency there. So unless the GAA get their entire disciplinary process tightened up and fit for purpose, trying to make an example of this, it ain't going to stand up. And that's where McGinley's coming from. Well, is it going to be consistent across the board? If a shoulder to the head is a sending off offence, well then it should be a sending off offence throughout the year and not on one particular incident. If a headlock is a sending off offence, then it should be a sending off offence. We've seen eye gouges before in the game. This is not the first time. Were they massively dealt with and did the suspensions hold up? I would very much doubt it. We've seen lees constantly. Have they been maybe some suspensions, maybe not? The only big suspensions that seem to hand up are the ones that are handed down to club footballers. County footballers continually get off. So this thing about making an example about this incident, we'll wait a few weeks, it'll calm down, and there'll be another incident, we'll all jump up, oh, this needs to be made an example of to stop it happening. It will not stop happening unless the entire disciplinary process gets made fit for purpose, which at the minute we all know it's not.
You sound thoroughly fed up.
Not thoroughly fed up, but the eye gouging is terrible, and we all are supposed to then come out and say how terrible it is and wring our hands and disgust at the melee. Look, this was such a competitive game, going down the tunnel at halftime after what was an amazing game of football. Everything that happened, how Galway had to be sick the way they gifted up those goals at the end. Armagh, the comeback they showed, the resilience that they showed, it was amazing. You had two teams giving it absolutely everything. There's going to be a bit of pushing and shoving. That's going to happen. If we want a true spirit in our game, sometimes it's going to boil over. And yes, we need a disciplinary process fit for purpose. But there's no point jumping up and down and looking people hung for this one incident. There was probably about 80 people involved in that, and one person got stepped way over the line and has major questions, and I'm sure will have major questions to answer. But again, let that be dealt with. The issue here is that we don't have a reliable disciplinary process, and so have I any confidence that this is unlikely to happen in the future, or that if it did happen in the future, it could be firmly dealt with through precedent? There's just no precedent in the GAA for dealing with any of this successfully.
No. Billy Joe, I guess, further to your point, at every juncture here we have major issues for the GAA to get on top of. So this culture, as you said, of too much contact, everything from when a substitute comes on and jogs over to his man, we know what happens. Like, that is just ingrained at club level, at county level, right through to some of the inconsistencies. For instance, David Goff sent off 4 Tyrone players in February of this year for contributing to a melee, and and that didn't stand up. I mean, that was suitably torn apart by the appeals process. And
those suspensions held at that time.
Oh, did they hold? Sorry,
I thought they did amazingly hold. Yep.
Oh, so they back off. Okay, they back off on that point. Excuse me, sorry, I'm mistaken there. But then contributing to melee seems to be the reason for Sean Kelly and Aidan Nugent to have been picked out yesterday. But like, how you can differentiate between Kelly and Nugent and the other 25 odd players there is difficult to grasp. But the other, of course, the overarching issue, and with acknowledgement of the Goff 4 Tyrone players is, and I saw this example even given in the Irish Independent today, Billy Joe. So back in April, you have Rian O'Neill. He is suspended by the Competitions Control Committee. He is then unsuspended by the Central Hearings Committee. Then you have the Central Hearings Committee upholding the suspensions of Campbell, Mackin and Nugent, but then they were subsequently quashed by the Central Appeals Committee. It's like alphabet soup here. You know, it is like a laughing stock, the GAA Disciplinary Committee, and there are now so many precedents established that, I mean, I'd say me and you, without much legal training, would have a fair stab at finding a way to get somebody off. So look, at every juncture, that was a long-winded point, but at every juncture there's no consistency, and then the overarching disciplinary system is in ruins at this stage.
It sure is. I think Enda has said it. We need to look at it from an overarching point of view. It's not something that will be addressed before the end of this championship. They have to go ahead and look at this last incident and deal with it as they see fit, and the county boards will make their appeals if they deem necessary. I think a situation, you mentioned all those, that alphabet soup, I think you've got to structure it, streamline it, that you maybe have a commissioner looking after discipline with a committee, and you have a small appeals process, and that's it, and you tighten it that way. And that's only my suggestion. But to having these so many different avenues where you can appeal to decisions like that it's nonsensical. It's not workable when you consider all the efforts different county boards do use with video into it. So I think that needs to be tightened up. I suppose just my initial point on the culture, I think you're mentioning it, Joe, in that all these incidents, grappling, whether you're throwing somebody to the ground, have context. And I really think that the instigator, the people that start the initial contact, have to be picked out. I know that Ethan Rafferty threw Damien Comer to the ground, but Damien Comer tried to stop him taking a quick kick out. That's what's happening. Those are the things that shouldn't happen, and it's all getting escalated. And I see that as a problem that needs to be sorted out in the long term, in the way the game is played.
What I'd love to see, I think it'd be a simple first step, and it would give the referees much more confidence, is that before referees have to submit the report, that them and their entire official team get to sit down in a room with whatever video footage is available of that match, and they get to look at the whole game, look at all the incidences, and then they submit their final formal report. And for me, that then should be gospel, and any suspension should be made off that. It should be made with great strength, and the appeals process should be really limited. to certain things off that, but certainly the referees getting a chance to review everything on video first and then submitting the report would be a good first step.
One last point, I suppose, and then we should talk about the football because it was so thrilling. But on the red cards logic, Billy Joe, Sean Kelly of Galway, who looked to be largely peacemaker, and then Aidan Nugent, Armagh joint captain, both sent off. To the extent people were initially wondering, did they just take two of the captains as a kind of settlement here? But this business of just saying, well, we have to send someone off, and almost, I don't know what David Coldrick's thinking, but almost picking two at random. That's not satisfactory either. I mean, we're going back to McHale and Coyle days here of just picking two. So should he have sent none off, I wonder?
Maybe, considering that everyone goes back to 15 minutes again for the start of the extra time anyway. So it was pointless. Some people, I didn't study the video forensically. Some people said that Kelly was involved in the start. Kelly and Nugent were involved in the start of it, and maybe that's why they were picked out as much as that. But I suppose when people go through all the different camera angles, they might be able to decipher it. I don't know. What impact did it have really?
Yeah. So you mentioned, Enda, it's Armagh's third of this season. So where does responsibility lay when it comes to McGinley?
I remember a few years ago, McGinley, he mentioned a couple of things in terms of just he looked at the top teams and he's seen how they could play the game on the edge, and every top team that wins stuff plays the game on the edge, and I think he felt that Armagh were a wee bit off that, both in terms of that and the game management. So I have no doubt that they have developed a more hardened edge. That in terms of the fact that they've had 3 rows, it is a coincidence that certainly doesn't look brilliant. But 2 of them were against Ulster neighbours. It's fairly claustrophobic up here at the best of times. So whether it's something that they have to answer in terms of the group, I don't know, but it's certainly a coincidence. The fact that previous to Saturday, none of the previous Malays had earned them really any suspensions, I think is something that sort of meant there was no reason for them not to really get involved again. But again, you look at the Malay, and I have only really watched it once or twice. There's not a huge amount happening. Like it wasn't a free for all. It was generally pushing and shoving, and as I say, one fella crossing well below or well beyond any line of decency, really. So again, I wouldn't be. There was other Malays this year. There will be other Malays as well. It is something we will say it again and again and again. Shouldn't be in the game. But again, unless there's an effective sanction, then you can't just suddenly start making it up as you go along.
Yeah. What's your sense, Billy Joe, now of, well, look, for Armagh it's less important, but of the Galway players? So if they're looking over at their captain sent off for getting involved in a Malay, really all of them could potentially be in trouble. Are you anticipating a deluge here of GAA suspensions for several Galway players?
No, and I'm not so sure that. Well, look, they have to go through the video and they have to analyse, and if there's something that's way out of order, well, then you have to be punished for that. But if it's a case of you can't, I suppose, sanction or suspend somebody now for contributing to Malay, because as Enda said, there could have been 80 people involved in that, and it'd be very tough on those Galway players looking forward to an All-Ireland semi-final to get called out on something like that. Yeah. So I don't think there will be any big suspensions, and I hope there is not, unless there is something that is, that a striking offence or something like that is absolutely clear. I don't expect big suspensions for Galway, and I don't think they should get them. I think this is something that a line has to be drawn. The disciplinary system has to be detailed, and there kind of has to be nearly a start again next season.
It's worth, as we segue into the match itself, to remember a few things. It was one of the most thrilling sporting spectacles you'll see, and as you both said, the scenes were a bit ugly for sure, but aside from the eye gouge, I don't know if there was anything overly egregious when you consider the context of this incredible contest. The game, thrilling. I mean, and like, take your pick between Rian O'Neill and his equaliser and Killian McDade and his equaliser. Some of the feats we saw in this game were just extraordinary.
Yeah, it was stunning. It was one of those rare occasions where the game lived up and surpassed our pretty high expectations for it. And it started off as a wee bit of a slow burner. Galway, for me, were a wee bit off colour at the start. Their forwards weren't really clicking. I thought defensively throughout the day, I thought Galway put in a huge performance. But then whenever Galway got going and got into the lead, they were really in the driving seat and played some excellent football. And then, look, they were 6 points up going into injury time. The majority of the drama and what we remember of the drama was in a fairly confined period. All in that, Galway were the better team for the majority of the game, and then just all hell broke loose in that previously assured Galway backline. The high balls, they will be having nightmares about that, and I'm pretty sure whilst they would be a possession-based team, they'll be pretty tempted to let the odd ball in the high. But from a neutral's point of view, looking at it, it had everything: huge hits, huge physicality, the athleticism, the quality of the scores, and a lot of your big name players from both sides were actually kept relatively quiet. Like Walsh and Comer were kept relatively quiet. Rian O'Neill kept relatively quiet, but just all over the pitch, it was all the players standing up, and it was a hell of a spectacle.
Because for Galway in particular, Billy Joe, all season people have said, well, Shane Walsh, Comer, Conroy in midfield, they're their three best players, they're generally playing well, and that's the reason Galway are doing well. Whereas, as Enda said, it was almost a supporting cast. Tierney in the half-forward line, Finnerty inside, McDade, I mentioned, with 1-1 in extra time. They really were the winning of this game. That'll be almost, in some respects, the most satisfying aspect for Galway.
For sure, Joe. I would have been one of the ones that had said that if you can keep the big three quiet, then you have a great chance of beating Galway. But what you saw was that, I suppose, the coming of age maybe of some of those Galway players, particularly Rob Finnerty, and getting 4 scores. Could have had another, really clinical finish. And Matthew Tierney was really good in the early stages of the game. 2 excellent points in the first half, and McDade's performance in extra time was just heroic. Best player in the field, kept going longer than anyone else. That'll be absolutely huge for Galway, and it'll be a big consideration for Derry when you look at it, because before everyone would have kind of thought that if you can keep Comer and Conroy and Walsh quiet, you have a really good chance of beating them. I think as well the key factor for Galway, which was pleasing for them, is I don't think they started the game that well. Opening 15 minutes, Armagh had some joy. Armagh were able to play some of that expansive long kick passing football and were able to get the ball into the full forward line. But then I think you saw them adapt, and that's the sign of a good team, and they were able to adapt early, midway through that first half. And Kieran Molloy, Patrick Kelly, players like that getting tucked in, defensive, making them harder to break down, winning the ball back and using it well. That was probably one of the most important aspects of the game, because it gave them that foothold. They went on and were the much better team in the second half. But as Pádraig Joyce said himself a few moments ago, they nearly threw it away against Mayo. They let Roscommon back into the game, and they did kind of throw it away in that last stages. And those balls went in around the box. That's something that he said they have addressed, so something they've obviously talked about, but they haven't dealt with them any better. There's still a bit of indecision around what's happening in that full back line. You saw for one of the balls that went in, I think Comer got in the way of the goalkeeper and those 3 players in around the line. So they just need to define roles when there's high balls coming in like that. Because even if you look down the other end, a lot of Armagh supporters would have had their heart in their mouth with Ethan Rafferty coming out. But at least the Armagh defence knew, well, this is the plan. Ethan is coming for everything, and everyone else picks up the breaks. Whereas Galway just need to provide that clarity in their full back line when dealing with high ball.
So that's the key: defined roles with a high ball.
I think so. I think that's the way. Yeah, when you're playing full back there and you have a goalkeeper, you need to know if the goalkeeper is going to come or he's not. If he's not going to come, you have to go for it with all you have, and he's there to pick up the pieces. But there can be no indecision, and it just looked like there was. And sometimes there's no right or wrong answer. Some goalkeepers are not comfortable coming 6 and 7 yards off their line to win a ball, and that's fine. But at least the defenders should know that they have to go and get it and stay out of his space. If the goalkeeper's staying on the line, there is no need for an outfield player to be back there on the line beside him. You have to be out there attacking the ball and picking it up. I think as well, in terms of one of the goals, Gleeson, there was so many of them, I can't remember. He was too eager to get his hand pass away. Yeah. I think it was the Turbot goal. He had a second or two while he was on his knees to have a look around. He had a go-away player beside him, and he learned from that bit of experience.
Yeah, it was probably that goal was really the only one that was really purely Gleeson's fault, and he's getting a bit of a hard time. But it was so in that Rafferty, in terms of from a goalkeeper's point of view, Rafferty sort of broke the rules that would be traditionally assigned to goalkeeper in terms of he was coming for everything. He was just coming flying, and some of them he missed. Comer had a great chance for a goal in the first half where Rafferty came out, flew past it, and it looks dangerous. But again, as Billy Joe says, if you know the keeper's at, then all them defenders know they have to pull in behind. For Galway's first, or for Armagh's first goal from the high ball, Gleeson got no protection at all. And like a pretty basic rule is if you're sort of waiting for your goalie to get it inside the 6-yard box, nobody should get a run at your goalkeeper. Well, Armagh got continuous runs at Gleeson, and then by the time that the third one came in, all confidence was gone, and there was just so much indecision there. So it's certainly something that they're going to have to address. But no matter what, like it's always a wry smile whenever I see people, they don't like a high ball. There is no team in the country has ever liked a high ball landing in their penalty box. It is always nervy, because it can always go somewhere. But whenever you've conceded 3 in the previous game in such a dramatic finish, well, then your confidence is going to be shot. And no matter what, there is going to be those wee doubts still there come semi-final.
So many extraordinary moments. Even the Rian O'Neill equaliser, I mean, it's so notable. Stephen Campbell took a quick free and the referee brought it back. So even Campbell, it didn't strike him as eminently kickable. And then Rian O'Neill must have cleared the crossbar by about 15 metres, I think, Billy Joe.
Yeah, and he has that ability. I think maybe when he looks back, he probably didn't have his best game. He was well marshalled. But when you see him playing club games, and even I've seen him playing for Armagh, he can strike a ball, 60 yards with confidence. I don't know what that distance was. That was 6 or 7 meters outside the 45 at an angle as well. And as you said, it looked to have more on it. He's a beautiful striker of the ball. He's one of these free takers. Sometimes I'd be curious, he takes the odd free out of his hands when he's so consistent and has such range from the ground that you would think that like Brian Sheehan used to play for Kerry, the distance they have is remarkable, and that they should continue to do that. But it shows the skill level he has. It shows the nerve he has. He has that mentality as a free taker. It was outstanding.
Yeah. On McDade's equaliser then, so he scores the goal, finishes that so calmly and such a brilliant run. I mean, it was phenomenal. As he's about to pull the trigger for the equalising point, Enda, I thought, don't shoot. They're on the run, going away from goal. Recycle it. Oh, what a point.
It looked a rash. You sort of were looking at the clock and says, right, they have time to keep working it, get the right man on the ball. And then they'd probably still about at least 40, 50 seconds on the clock at least. And you always knew that the referee wouldn't blow it up if they were in an imminent and a well-built attack. So either maybe play for your free, wait for a free, you'll get one slightly easier in that regard. Next thing, he just got the ball in the hand and had a shot. And whenever he had a shot, I thought, right, well, he must think that it's a half-decent chance and that they would still have time even if he does miss. But he just nailed it. It swung to Pádraig Joyce on the sideline. Yeah. And I think he had the two hands almost going up to his head. It was one of those classic ones you'd be thinking, what he is shooting from, great score. You're sort of changing. You're changing halfway, but to have the confidence to go and do that, he had a strong game anyway, but that was as good a score. Kevin Cassidy's obviously a brilliant score for Donegal many years ago against Kildare, just that last gasp. Player taking on the initiative, backing themselves with complete confidence, and you only score a point like that if you strike that ball with huge confidence. So massive score, and you'll do well to see a better one this summer.
Yeah, amazing. On the penalties then, we had James O'Donoghue with us yesterday, and Billy Joe, he just made the observation, hadn't struck me, but when he said it I thought, that is kind of interesting. Every single penalty, players opened out their body. No one whipped it across the other side, which was just a coincidence and law of averages, but that was kind of he noted that, which was kind of interesting. Pádraig Joyce said there in the audio we played, they've practiced penalties every single night since December. The GAA world quite split on penalties. Joyce said, even as the winning manager, it's no way to finish a GAA match. If we're all accepting, Billy Joe, that the calendar is the calendar and there had to be a result yesterday, what's the best way to end the game?
I don't know. I don't know what's the best way. I would agree with Pádraig Joyce. I think that it's not really a Gaelic football skill, kicking a penalty in its own right. I think I don't like the penalty shootout in rugby either, to be honest. So I don't know. Is that a good solution? I think that for the sake of 2 or 3 more weeks at quarterfinal and semi-final stage, could you make room for a replay? I think that would be fair at this stage of the year. Particularly in the big showpieces in Croke Park. So I'm afraid, Joe, I can't find any other better solution for you.
Yeah, it's tricky. There's a certain irony, Enda, that especially at this stage of the season, A replay, by definition, suggests we've had a close-run game, and these are rarities in the GAA calendar. We want more of them, and we're doing away with them. So, look, we are prisoners of the calendar now. Do you have a ready-made solution to end the game if we had to end the game?
We're prisoners to the calendar, but there's teams this year, they've played about 2 or else 3 games from the end of March.
Yeah.
So we're in a condensed calendar, and yet there is huge largesse. Pretty much, again, it's because we are shoehorning the provincial championships, and they are there and they cannot be done away with. I suppose I'm in the camp even from Ulster, and it'd be a big issue up here, obviously. But I just don't see how you can have such a condensed season and yet have teams 4-6 weeks. I know it's going to be different next year when the Robin thing is in, but still, rather the season structured, that come quarter-final stage, if you go to full-time level, extra time level, and even maybe an additional 5 minutes, if that's still level at this stage, go to a replay. Have it organised that you can go midweek or go the following weekend or go a Thursday night or something like that there. But I think some form of additional game. And then I think bottom line, it may still have to end up in penalties. I don't think we'll ever be treated to a Dublin v Meath scenario of the 4 matches because the calendar won't allow for that. So I think it's probably unfair to supporters and the cost and everything else nowadays. But I think everybody would like at least one replay built in before, but I think we still have to have a finish of it. And whilst it's unfair, well, when 2 teams are completely tied, there is no right way to finish that. So I think you still have to have some way of deciding it. And penalties does bring its own excitement and its own entertainment. It was a phenomenal spectacle yesterday in Croke Park. And I don't know how anybody else, but I got up after watching it and I was drained. I felt it tough to get myself sort of wanting to watch the Kerry and Mayo game because I was just that fatigued after watching Galway Armagh.
Well, speaking of, we have other games to get to. Enda McGinley, Billy Joe Padden staying with us. Back in 1 sec.
Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out hashtag the toughest for more.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
We understand. You have to move your bank and taking that first step can be daunting. But when you choose to move to Permanent TSB, you're not just choosing an award-winning current account. You're taking the first step to easier, everyday banking. Apply for our digital current account in-app today. It takes just minutes. After that, everything else will be that little bit less daunting. Don't just move. Choose Permanent TSB. Application in your sole name for over 18 personal customers and residents of the Republic of Ireland only. Qualifying criteria, terms and conditions apply. Permanent TSB PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
To demonstrate Citroen's advanced comfort technology, we will be recording this ad inside a Citroen while driving on a bumpy, potholed country road. Okay, here we go. Citroen's progressive hydraulic cushion suspension filters out bumps and dips in the road, so that instead of talking like this, I'm talking like this. And the sound-insulated cabin reduces exterior noise, so we don't get to hear this. But instead, we hear this. So, after more than 100 years of pioneering technology, we've made a car so comfortable, we can record a radio ad in it. Citroen, engineered for comfort. See citroen.ie.
Guaranteed Irish business members continue to sustain jobs and communities across Ireland.
Pipelife Eco, Ireland's leading designer and supplier of thousands of renewable heating solutions. Established in 1970, Pipelife Eco is your one-stop shop for complete renewable heating solutions. From market-leading products, free initial advice, through to bespoke design, final commissioning and technical support. To find out more, visit their website www.pipelifeeco.ie. So look out for the G, guaranteedirish.ie. All together better.
Relax and get away from it all this summer at the Heritage, the luxury hotel in the heart of County Laois. Explore lavish country estates nearby and mountain trails in the Slieve Blooms. Tantalise your taste buds with artisan food at Blake's Restaurant. Or enjoy some retail therapy in Kildare Village, followed by some pampering in our luxury spa. Book now at theheritage.com. The Heritage, just off the M7 in Killinard, County Laois, part of FBD Hotels and Resorts.
Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out hashtag the toughest for more.
Welcome back. Jerry's texted in to say football championship has only caught fire and we've 2 weekends left. Such a pity, says Jerry. Well, I suspect we'll be having that conversation at the end of the season. I know there are 2 weekends in August when the rugby is over and the Premier League hasn't started, and the GAA is, I guess, over as well from July 24th, where there's nothing happening, and it just doesn't sit right, I think, increasingly with people, as much as we want the club game to flourish. To that end, we don't have much time ourselves here left. We're with Enda McGinley and Billy Joe Padden. So we've dealt with Galway and Armagh. James Horn has stepped down this evening. Billy Joe, I don't think anyone's utterly shocked at this. So he reached 2 All-Ireland finals in his first stint. He reached 2 All-Ireland finals in his second stint. It's been a brilliant journey. I feel very lucky to have worked with great players and people during that time. So what are we to say of James Horn and what he's contributed over the last decade to Mayo football?
Well, I think that his contribution has been absolutely huge. I think you wouldn't have the conversation about Mayo being involved in so many of these big games, these All-Ireland finals, without James Horn. He's built this team. He's shown a remarkable ability to bring players up to the required level and them to compete. And I think when all the players that he's coached and had a key hand in their development from maybe their younger years to being, established high quality inter-county footballers and all the All-Star awards they have won. I suppose plenty of people in other counties and in Mayo as well will say, well, they were never able to win the big one, and that's a fact, and no one can walk away from that, whether James or the players. But I think the contribution he's made to Mayo football has been immense. Before James Horn, Mayo, and in my time, you were a very inconsistent team, capable of great days, capable of days where you would be well below par. He added that consistency, maybe that toughness as well that was needed to be consistent at that level and continually perform in big games. And I just think that he's made an amazing contribution to Mayo football. In some ways, as a supporter, disappointed for him as much as anyone else that they weren't able to win the All-Ireland. He's probably one of the most important people in Mayo GAA over the last 40 or 50 years, considering what he was, a great player as well, and a great manager, and responsible for this, I suppose, which has been a really, really positive period in Mayo football history. And still, when you look at the Mayo football team, I think his legacy, and part of it will be, is that if you go to Mayo, you still see every kid is wearing a red and green jersey. Mayo football is the big thing. They all look forward to the Connacht Championship every summer. And that's part of his legacy as Mayo manager. So credit to him, and I'd just like to thank him for all his efforts.
Yeah, and there can be the reductive quip that Billy Joe referenced about, well, you never won, so how good were you? Oran was bloody good.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we always talk, one of the most talked about sort of topics is the best players not to have won All-Ireland. Well, Horn probably isn't the best manager not to have won All-Ireland. You just feel, you find it hard not to feel for him, like what he done to go toe-to-toe with the greatest side that has played the game in that Dublin team, to be the one that eventually took them down, and then to end up losing the All-Ireland final to Tyrone that had just hit a real spike in performance. Mayo, the games that they've given us, the performances they've given us, their resilience has been something else, and a lot of the quality of the play. And he probably has lacked that out-and-out star forward that maybe has got other teams over the line, and he was particularly hamstrung this year then with the loss of Ryan O'Donoghue and Tommy Conroy, and it was a loss that was just hampering Mayo all year. And wee bit like Tyrone and Donegal, they just were a team running out of gas all year, and they eventually got put out of their misery. But certainly James Horn's contribution, there will be few managers has done as much for their county.
Yeah, for sure. Billy Joe, akin to Gooch chasing Philly McMahon back in that All-Ireland final, when you watch Cillian O'Connor having to go back against Tom O'Sullivan, you just got a sense it was not going to be Mayo's day. And then that was copper fastened by the shooting in that second half period. Mayo had 49 attacks to Kerry's 41. Mayo had 2 shots to Kerry's 28. There was a period where Horan got the conversion rate right up. Geez, it went off a cliff yesterday.
Yes, and I think the stats speak for themselves. I think, as Enda says there, particularly when you're, it's not ideal for Cillian O'Connor to have, a great player like Thomas Sullivan racing up the field, and he loves to attack and is a great attacker from that position. It's not the role that he would want to be playing. As Enda said, when you lose Tommy Conroy and Ryan O'Donoghue and they're not available to you, well, then everyone else on the team has to, I suppose, strain that little bit harder to try and create those scores. And it just was evident of a team that was trying to force it. Midfielders missing chances that they would normally get. Mayo half-backs usually get up and get a couple of scores, but there was misses in there from Lee Keegan and Paddy Durkin and Matty Ruan as well, players that we know can score. And sometimes when you're just trying to do that too much, you just don't execute as well as you can. So Mayo can have no excuses about it. Really, the conversion rate was not good enough and nowhere near close to what it would need to be. But I think it's very difficult to say that the loss of those players is not impactful. It'd be very difficult for any county to deal with two of your best young attackers and really important parts of your team, because they add the guile and the pace maybe in an area of the field that you don't have those options. And it's very difficult to come back from that.
I saw Brian Sheehan end up speaking to the Irish Examiner, and he said, for instance, a Derry or a Galway or an Armagh would have beaten Kerry over the weekend. So, yeah, they not quite got out of jail, but those stats, they are quite worrying if you're looking at the general flow of that game. And where are Kerry?
Yeah, funny. I wouldn't just jump to the conclusion that those other teams would have beaten Kerry. That might be doing a bit of a disservice to Mayo. Kerry are all right. Kerry, bottom line, I think they were in the difficult scenario yesterday, and even Jack O'Connor sort of, for me, let the cat out of the bag a wee bit afterwards, where he said that these players are yearning for a go at Dublin. And I remember being in that position. We ended up actually being caught. Tyrone, whenever we had our eyes on the next game, and we got caught actually by Cork. But Kerry would have been very confident they were going to beat Mayo. There was no getting away that Mayo were not in particularly good form. Kerry's worry would have been about the layoff in that 4-week period, but I would imagine they would have been fairly confident they were going to manage that and should have enough to overcome Mayo in that quarter-final. And I think when a team has got such a big game on the horizon, and maybe it was Dublin's performance wasn't fantastic either, sometimes it's hard to be right on it, and that's not disrespecting Mayo in any way. It's just how the two teams were coming into the game. Kerry didn't play particularly well defensively. Some of their players are in brilliant form, like obviously O'Sullivan. Stronger in midfield than they have been for a while. I was more impressed with them in midfield than I have been for a while. And up front, they just have serious firepower that we can see. And yes, they weren't anywhere near top gear yesterday, but beating Mayo, getting through to the All-Ireland semi-final, like that was the toughest of the quarterfinals that they could have had, and they still came through it comfortably. So yes, they didn't hit top gear, but make no bones about it, they're looking to take on this semi-final. That's where they see themselves. Can they switch it on? That's going to be the big question. Derry's obviously, for me, probably the form team in the country now, but Kerry have the potential to find that top gear.
Yeah. Well, clock is fully against us. We're not even going to get to Dublin Cork. Expand on Derry for us then, because it's hard to know what to take beyond when they were 2-1 to no score up and sensational those first kind of 10 minutes. So what do we say about Derry?
They remind me so much of our team, the Tyrone team in 2003. We were a young team coming through. We had won the Ulster title and nobody really was taking too much notice, but we were playing with an intensity and a hunger. We destroyed Fermanagh in the quarter-final, and then we took on Kerry in the semi-final in the famous day of puke football. But they are playing with a game plan that suits them perfectly. Why? Because it allows their manic intensity and manic energy levels full flow in the game. They are playing an unapologetic defensive strategy, and then they have legs and hunger to make their tackling brilliant, to get loads of turnovers, and then this sort of wild dog intensity in terms of getting forward, and this out and out. The goals they took yesterday were fantastic. They are playing with a focus and intensity that is beyond anything else that's there in the championship, and they are a team to be reckoned with. Make note that the nature of them as a county, now that they've got their confidence and their swagger back, they are going to be tough. And for Galway, it's really intriguing. Like, the only way really that has been shown to take down that ultra blanket defence, counter-attacking style whenever it's going well is to face it up with a similar style. Donegal got critiqued in the Ulster final, but they played that way because they know that that's how you have to play. Even Dublin played that way to eventually take down teams that play that way. So it'll be really intriguing to see what Galway try to do to take down Derry, but make no bones about it, I think the questions are Galway's to answer. Derry's going to come and do what they're going to do. Galway have to decide how they're going to try and take them down.
Yeah, Billy Joe, in 30 seconds if you can, I know it's unfair. Do you see Derry as favourites for all those reasons?
Yeah, I agree with Enda's sentiment. I think the interesting thing for me about Derry was against Clare, they felt they could really pressure high up the field in Croke Park, and they had that confidence. Chrissy McCaig, Brendan Rodgers, really high up the field at halfway at times, pressing. Will Rory Gallagher be brave enough to do that against Galway? Because Galway have the players that can counter-attack and hurt you as well. And at the same time, as Enda says, they could sit back and play their defensive game and frustrate Galway and beat them that way. So for me, it's how interesting in terms of how aggressive Derry would be to put pressure on Galway. And I think that will make it for a great game if they are aggressive, because that'll suit Galway as well. And it mightn't just be the stalemate that people are expecting. But either way, you can't but be impressed with Derry.
Yeah. Lads, an amazing hour there of analysis. I mean, a hell of a thing to do an hour, and we didn't get to one of the 4 matches on over the weekend, but there's so much to talk about. So Billy Joe Padden, thank you. Enda McGinley, appreciate it. Cheers, fellas.
All the best.
Our Gaelic football coverage and Off the Ball in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more. I suspect we'll have plenty more GAA across this week on the show, so we will get to some Dublin Cork talk as well.
Gaelic football on Off the Ball.
With AIB, proud sponsors of the GAA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more. Did you know that today is SME Day? Well, now you do.